Hello and welcome back to my channel, and if you're new here, welcome. Today's video is a little bit special because right now, as I'm filming this, it's been exactly 1 year since I started learning Japanese. I started studying Japanese on the 22nd of May 2023, and since then it's been a journey, and one that hasn't been easy. Looking back, I feel like I've come so far and learned so much, and yet there's still so much out there that I have yet to learn. But instead of feeling anxious or discouraged, I actually feel pretty good about it. Like, there's still so much out there for me to discover. It's like a whole sea of knowledge just waiting to be explored. So today I'm going to be sharing with you what my 1 year's progress of Japanese looks like, sharing my thoughts, my study methods and how they've evolved over the course of my learning, mistakes I've made along the way and how you can avoid them, as well as my thoughts on the future of studying Japanese and achieving fluency, etc. So without further ado, let's get started. In terms of my progress, I would say that I'm somewhere around N2 level. I didn't really believe it at first, but that's what I heard from a couple of people I spoke Japanese to, as well as what I was graded at after my 1 month of study in Japan recently. I know about 1000 to 1100 kanji, and I think because I studied Chinese before, so in the beginning it helped a lot with memorizing the basic kanji. I think because I'm only semi-fluent in reading Chinese and most of what I know is simplified Chinese, learning more complex kanji is still pretty challenging for me, and I pretty much go through the same process of learning them as anyone else would. I think a lot of people have this common misconception that knowing Chinese means that Japanese is just automatically so easy to learn, like it's an absolute walk in the park, and that could not be further from the truth. Knowing Chinese takes the time out of having to memorize kanji and the meanings behind them, though I feel like that's only the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Japanese as a language. Japanese and Chinese grammar are very different, the pronunciations of kanji can be similar but sometimes different, and even stroke order for the same kanji can be different across both languages. Knowing Chinese, I feel like, has made certain concepts and ideas easier to grasp and some vocabulary easier to remember, and that's really it. So I would say knowing Chinese definitely helps, but even if you don't know Chinese, you wouldn't be at a significant disadvantage when learning Japanese. At around the 1000 kanji mark, I usually don't have difficulty in navigating things like websites, signs, reading advertisements, etc. And even when I do come across kanji I don't know, I typically can sort of figure out what it means because I know the rest of the kanji. Or sometimes when I see two kanji I know being used in a combination I haven't seen before, I can kind of gauge and read what it means even if I don't know how to pronounce it. Like, for example, I recently came across the word soryo when I was buying something on a Japanese website for the first time. I knew both of these kanji separately, but it was my first time seeing them together. Even then I could deduce that it meant shipping fee because the first kanji means like send and the second one is something like pay, fee, cost, etc. And you see it being used in words like gyuryo, muryo, etc. So I feel like I know enough at times to be able to piece together the meaning of things based on what I already knew. With that being said, I feel like at around 1000 to 1100 kanji, that's still nowhere near a comfortable enough level. So all considering the average Japanese person knows over 2000. So I still have a ways to go. The way I'm studying has also changed a lot since I first started. When I first started, I focused a lot on studying grammar and practicing them with textbook exercises, such as conjugating verbs, writing simple sentences to describe images, etc. I basically spent as much time writing as possible because this also helped me to remember hiragana and katakana. As I got into pre-intermediate level, that's when I started to incorporate more listening and speaking practice because I felt like I knew enough to start using basic Japanese. So that's when I started listening to podcasts about various topics, as well as taking private lessons for a chance to practice speaking. As I continued studying and progressed into intermediate level, my textbook studies became centered around reading longer texts and answering comprehension questions. So I shifted away from those simple grammar exercises into actually applying them to form responses and write paragraphs to passages. I continued to listen to podcasts, but I started to pick ones which were more difficult, where the pace was faster and more complex vocabulary was used. I know I always rave about this textbook, but I truly believe that Tobira is the best intermediate level Japanese learning material out there because, true to its name, it prepares you for the transition into more advanced Japanese. If you want to know how I did this to pass the JLPT N3 within 7 months of studying, be sure to check out my other video which I will link here. Right now, I feel like I'm nearing my end of studying with textbooks, so my studies are starting to shift away from textbooks and towards immersion into native material. Instead of studying, I'm watching dramas with Japanese subtitles, reading light novels, manga, articles, etc. I'm at a stage where I can read decently enough, and even when I don't know a certain grammar structure or a kanji, I can either fill in the gaps on my own or navigate the material with a dictionary. So basically, my study nowadays is focused almost entirely on immersion, making Anki flashcards of new vocabulary and grammar I come across from the media I'm using, and supplementing with JLPT prep books. These are purely for revision, consolidation, and making sure that my knowledge is up to par with the expectations of the JLPT. For now, gradually moving into full immersion to learn is what feels right for me, and I guess that's kind of what happens when you start to become truly fluent in a language, right? Like, you can just consume media naturally and learn from it without really having to study. So I guess that's the direction that I'm kind of going in. As I've studied, I feel like I've really tried to tap into my intuition to determine what's the best way of studying for me. I mean, like listening to myself on what ways of studying works for me and what doesn't, what feels fun and what doesn't, but also being decisive. Right from the start, I had a clear goal for myself. I wanted to be fluent in Japanese and speak it as naturally as a Japanese person would. I think because I tried to be intuitive with my studies, I managed to avoid a lot of pitfalls that would have otherwise hindered my progress. But one thing I wish I did sooner was being less afraid to progress or try new things. Like, I hung on to Duolingo for way too long. I used it for about 110 days before I stopped in the beginning, and I think the whole streak and the structure of it really ropes you in by giving you a false illusion of progress. It barely teaches you any grammar and vocabulary, and when you're constantly translating, it doesn't get you thinking critically in Japanese enough for it to be effective. I think if I had been more willing to accept that it wasn't helping me sooner, I would have been able to invest that time elsewhere, which would have been more beneficial. 110 days isn't all that long, but I think it would have done more damage the longer I had relied on it. Another thing I feel like is commonly overlooked is studying pitch accent. I'm actually guilty of doing this too, but I think because I grew up consuming a lot of Japanese media already, I could kind of grasp pitch accent from just listening pretty seamlessly despite barely studying it at all. But if I wasn't so lucky, I think it would have given me a lot of trouble with being able to speak naturally. If I had to start over though, I don't think there's a whole lot that I would change because I'm pretty happy with the way I studied. I think the only thing I'd really change is to not start with Duolingo and instead practice hiragana from day one, because I was using romaji for the first 2 weeks, just too intimidated to get started on learning hiragana and katakana, and I would focus more on studying pitch accent. I think right now I'm just planning to keep building my knowledge and fluency. Like, I'm transitioning into full immersion where I'm listening, watching, and reading content aimed at natives and learning from them. I'm aiming for N2 this year and N1 next year, and even then I feel like N1 is just the tip of the iceberg for me. Like, to me, the JLPT is like a path of stepping stones that I'm following, which will take me to the level of Japanese that I want to achieve. There's so much more Japanese that exists beyond N1 level and material, and the thought of being able to leave this JLPT Japanese learning bubble and into the world of real Japanese, so to speak, is something that I'm really keen for. So that's what my 1 year of learning Japanese looks like. Your journey might not look like mine at all, and that's totally okay. I think the most important thing is that as long as you're following your intuition and studying in a way that feels fun and right for you, and you'll feel good about the way you're studying if that's the case, then that's already more than enough. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, be sure to leave a like, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe for more content like this. Happy studying, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!